Hi, everyone. Welcome to the UFOhub live stream. Today's guest is going to be Debra Kauble, and I will be talking to her about her upcoming book called Extraordinary Contact: Life Beyond Intruders, and whatever else might be coming up. Of course, as always, when we're getting close to finish up, we'll be doing some Q&A, so I hope you have your questions ready. But first, before we get started, I would like to go over some quick information. So, as you guys know, things have been kind of busy for me here. So it's finally coming to a point to where I can, it's not interfering with so many interviews and what I do here with the UFO Hub. So next week, I'm going to have, of course, Wednesday, open lines as always. So just install a Telegram, join the UFO Hub group, and I'll be able to talk to you that way, as you might have seen before. So we're just simply sharing stories and just talking and hanging out online. And then, of course, I'm not quite sure yet who I'm going to have Friday, but something that's going to be a bit different next week is that on Monday, I'm already have a confirmed date to talk to Whitley Strieber. So if you guys could, I'm sorry if it kind of messes up anything, but I hope you could join me on Monday. It's also going to be at 7 p.m. Central Time, and that was the only time we could work out. I was hoping that maybe to get him on a Friday, but it was just too busy. So I figured it would work out to just switch occasionally on the day, and of course, I'm sure some of you wouldn't mind either. So anyway, with that being said, let me do some switching here. All right. Debbie, thanks for being on. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, so I figured if you could maybe start out with a little bit of background information about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, um, m- it's been a long time since Intruders was published, and it's just recently being republished and reavailable for the public. But I am the Kathy Davis that Bud Hopkins wrote about in Intruders. That book was about my life and the things that I had experienced up until that point. And in particular, an incident that happened on June 30th, 1983, at my mom and dad's home that left a mark in the yard that lasted for a couple of years, damaged the soil, made my dog really sick to the point where she actually had to be put down a few months later, and made me really sick, and also triggered a lot of memories that come back of other contact with something alien. Uh, I use the word alien because it's something that I don't know what it is. So, um, anyway, um, I've had a lot of experiences witnessing UFOs. I've had a couple of pretty major uh, um, other incidents in my life. Nothing like June 30, 83 that left the mark in the yard, but there was a thing that happened to me in 2005 that was kind of involved the whole town I live in a way. I can talk about that in a little while if you remind me. And you know, I eventually one of the ways I deal with things that scare me is I try to learn all of that I can about it because I feel like knowledge is power. So back in the 90s, I became an investigator for MUFON, and I went on to investigate quite a few cases over 8, 10 year period. And and then in about 2005, I started getting more interested in paranormal stuff, like what people would call like ghost hunting. And I joined a group down in Indianapolis, and I kind of helped bring the paranormal and ufology together in at least in the state of Indiana. I kind of helped do that, which I was kind of proud of. And I got really interested in collecting EVPs. Seems like that's the best thing I do. I Some of the people that I worked with call me the antenna. I can get EVPs on my recorder and somebody else sitting right next to me with their recorder running, it won't even they don't even get it. So I don't know what that's about. But anyway, I don't know. There's just so much. I've got 50 years of odd experiences in a strange life. And Bud wrote Intruders, and I think it was published in 92 maybe. Um, and then there was a miniseries of the same that used the same name that was roughly based on that book. It was on CBS, and I think that was in 92 or 93. Uh, but my life continued on after Intruders, and I had different weird, strange kind of encounters and paranormal experiences later on. And um and then life threw me some real big curveballs. Just what normal life, well, I wouldn't call it normal. I had a house dropped on me by a tornado, and I went through a suicide with my late husband and other things like that, but I came through it all. And
That's quite a bit to go
uh
through.
there are times I could talk to people about the normal quote unquote part of my life, with the part without the paranormal UFO stuff, and people would still look at me like, what? you know I'm like, no, really. So um this the book that I just has just recently, it's going to be published, it's going to be available on May the 30th, that you spoke of earlier. It's just like a compilation of my experiences that prompted the book Intruders, and how my life evolved after that. And it does include, some of these stories of the hard stuff that I went through with my husband and with the tornado. But um, it, it, my goal was to share that part of myself with people and show people that you can get through all this crazy stuff and come out better than ever. I mean, because I feel like now at this point in my life, I am. Uh, I've learned that I'm a lot stronger person than I thought I was, and the experiences that I had early on that were scary and physical have changed, um, and it's changed me. You know, I'm not having as much what I would consider physical contact with whatever this life form is that I have contact with, but it's something is still happening. It's on just a different level. It's on a psychological level, an intellectual level, and a spiritual level. So
Well, Debbie, what do you say if we covered a little bit about what was originally written about in Intruders, to give that background aspect, and then we'll go
sure.
into what you have going on in your new book.
Okay, Intruders kind of it revolves around a June 30th, 1983 incident that occurred at my parents' home. I was a single mom that had just recently, had not too long ago, moved back home with my parents going through a divorce. And I was to make a little extra money, I was cutting out patterns for a gal that lived behind us who was a friend of mine who made costumes. And she'd pay me, by the piece to come and cut stuff out for her. So I was getting ready to go over there and cut some patterns with her that night. And as I was standing at the kitchen window, waiting, washing my hands and waiting, getting ready to leave, I noticed an odd light in the pump house of the swimming pool that was out in the backyard. The pump house wasn't very big. I'm It was like half the size of a aluminum shed, only it was made of sandstone. Anyway, there was something weird about the light that struck me odd, that it just didn't seem like the right color. But and I thought to myself, I remember thinking to myself, why is the door open? Because I knew I had shut it when I was out there last. And I pointed it out to my mother, and she kind of like, well, don't worry about it. My father was working the second shift at that time, and she said he'll be home later. So I got in my car, and instead of just driving off, I decided to go This house was like a tri-level, and it had 2 garage or 2 driveways, one that went down into the front of the house in front of the attached 2-car garage, and then another drive that forked off and went along the side of the house past the swimming pool, and then was like a circle in front of my dad's workshop, which was back farther behind the house. So I thought, I'm just going to drive back around there and just take a look, not thinking at all about aliens or UFO stuff whatsoever. I was thinking about burglars and axe murders and crazy people like that. So anyway, I drove down the turnaround and came back up, and at that point, I noted the light was gone out of the pump house, and, I also noted that the pedestrian door to the attached garage was now open, and I knew that wasn't supposed to be open because my dog Penny was supposed to be in the garage. We used to keep her in there at night because she was like the neighborhood floozy, and we didn't want more puppies, so we'd keep her in there at night. She didn't like being in the house, but she loved her little place in the garage. Anyway, I made note of that, and then I went to my friend's house, was right behind ours, like, took 2 minutes to get there, and I called my mom, and I told her what I'd seen. I thought maybe the light bulb had just burned out in the pump house. Uh, she said, "Don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. Your dad'll be home." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I hung up, and as soon as I hung up, she called right back. And I had picked the phone up, like, I hadn't even really taken my hand off of the receiver when it rang again and picked it back up, and it was my mom, and it was her voice, and she says, "I want you to come home right now." And I was taken aback by this because nothing ever scared my mom. My mom was a rock, and she sounded scared. And I said, "Mom, what's the matter?" And she's like, "I just want you to come home right now." She never told me why. Until, like, a week later, she said she's seen a ball of light around the bird feeder out by the and behind the kitchen window where I had been standing looking out. But she didn't tell me that till, like, a week later, because she forgot, and but, my friend's husband heard the conversation, and he could hear that something was wrong, and he yelled over me into the phone to my mom, "Call the police, that's what we pay him for." And my mom heard him and she said, "I don't want anybody here but you." And I'm like, "Okay." So I hung up and I went back home. Took me 2 minutes. I got I pulled up the side yard where I had originally gone driving around the turnaround and got out, parked there next to the patio room and went in. My mom was standing in the doorway and I walked into the door into the patio room with her. And she's like, "What are you gonna do?" And I grabbed my dad's shotgun. He had a shotgun that he kept next to the trash compactor. It was not loaded, and mom says it's not loaded, and I said, "Whoever out there don't know that. I can get close enough to him to swat him with it, I bet you." So, I took that and I went outside. I would looked through the backyard. I went back into the pump house and looked around, didn't see anything. Then I decided to look for my dog, and I went back on the other side of the pool and I found my dog. She was under my dad's panel truck and she was not happy and would not come out. So I'm like, "Fine, stay there." And I went back across the yard into the pedestrian door of the garage, and there was a set of mattress leaned up against the garage. Otherwise, there was nothing else in the garage, and there was nowhere else anyone could have hidden except behind the mattress. So I kind of pulled, um, I'm creeping up behind the mattress with this shotgun, and I'm like, "You better I got you now, I got a gun." And close, no one was there. And just about the time I realized that there wasn't anybody behind that mattress, I started feeling really weird. My body tingled and burned, and it felt like I was on fire everywhere. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, I gotta get out of here. I'm gonna die." And I headed to the pedestrian door. And the minute I hit the open doorway, bam, something hit me in the chest, right, right in the chest, right above my gut. And there was so much white light, and it was so intense and bright that I know I had my eyes closed, but I could still see it. I couldn't get away from it. And I felt like I could feel every atom of my body vibrate, and I felt like I was on fire, and I remember thinking, "Oh my god, I'm going to die. This is how it feels to die." And, it I couldn't I couldn't see anything, even after the vibration and the light intensity finally let got better, went down. The vibration slowly stopped, but I couldn't move, and I felt, um it felt like time stopped. It was the weirdest feeling I'd never had. It felt like for a moment, like time stopped. I know that feeling that I had that I thought I was gonna die, it couldn't have lasted more than a few seconds. I don't think I would have survived it, but, it felt like it went on forever and ever, and then, all of a sudden, like I said, everything kinda stopped. Vibration stopped, the shaking stopped, the light got dimmer, and I could open my eyes, but at that point now, my vision was so crummy. Like, if you've ever gotten your picture taken by a bunch of people with flash bulbs and you got it in the eyes, those blight spots that you see in your vision that you can't see anything else, that's the way
Yeah.
my vision was. I could see movement out in front of me in the yard, and I realized at some point I was no longer in the doorway, but actually out on the cement patio in front of the door, and I could see all this movement in front of me. At one point, I felt something pull down on my shoulder, on my right shoulder. I felt a burning sensation in my right ear. Felt like in in my mind I could see it was like a knitting needle that was hot as a poker. That's what it felt like. That's not what it was. That's just how what I that's how it felt. And as I saw these things, there were six small bullet shaped things in the yard, and I began to realize they looked like little children, and they were moving around, and but they weren't really walking. It was more of a slide or a glide. And as they started to line up in the yard in front of me and glide down towards me, but not directly at me, uh that's when I saw this thing. I don't know what this thing was. uh, for 30 years people have talked about it and called it a craft. In retrospect, there is no way on the planet, or any other planet for that matter, that six little kids could get in this thing and go anywhere, because it wasn't much bigger than the pump house swimming pool. I mean, the swimming pool pump house. I mean, and then it just wasn't that big. When I looked at it, when I could see it, it almost looked like it wasn't 100% touching the ground, because it almost looked like it was like a bobber, a fishing bobber on a calm lake, that ever so slight little wobble. And it did have four things protruding off of it on each side, on each quarter of it. But they didn't look sturdy enough to be legs to hold weight. It looked more like something just to stabilize it. You know what I mean? Anyway, it at one point, I remember hearing someone, never saw anybody that I consciously remembered, but hearing someone say it was unfortunate that I had felt that pain. And I also, there was a white soft ball of light, probably about 20 feet in front of me. I noticed it after the little people disappeared into this thing. There's a ball of light, and it looked about the size of a basketball, and it was much easier to look at and much softer. And it seemed about as high up off the ground as I am tall, and I'm 5'3". And then it went down really slow, and then it came back up slowly, and I felt like it was looking at me. And I kept thinking, just don't come any closer to me. I didn't want to look at this thing. Excuse me. But I did not want to look at it because I needed to know where it was at all times, because I felt like I was right on the edge of losing it. And all of a sudden, I remember thinking, "Oh my god, my kids. They're in the house with my mom," and I'm thinking, "Oh my god, my kids." And immediately after that thought, I heard that voice again say, "Your children are fine." Basically, that's what that they said, "Your children are fine." And then I heard my name, And as soon as I heard my name, uh, it was like someone just snapped their fingers, and I started to move. I turned and walked across the patio. Um, and I noted at that point my mom was like had her head out the door of the upper kitchen. She was in the kitchen door because the lower patio at the garage. And remember, this is a tri-level, and you walk up several steps to the next porch, which was the kitchen. Mom had her head out the door, and I learned later that when I heard my name being called, it was actually my mom that called my name, which kind of just snapped me out of whatever trance I was in. And she says, "Is everything all right?" And I said, "Yeah, everything's cool." Uh, but I'm thinking in my mind at this point, dude, I don't want to go. I don't really want to sew now. I didn't feel right physically, and I just felt like I wanted to get wet. And it was a warm evening, so um, I got a hold of the gal whose house I was going to sew with, and I said, "What, you and your daughter want to come swim?" And she's like, "Yeah." So I went over there, and her daughter and I came back, and we went swimming. And as we were walking across the back of the house, in the area where I had seen those little figures move, my friend's daughter suddenly steps on something in the yard, and she's like, "Oh my God." She thought she stepped on a bee because it stung, and it felt funny and tingly, and then her foot started to feel numb. And her mom's like, get your foot in the water. It'll help it feel better." So we all got to the swimming pool. We got in the water, and within a couple of minutes of being in the pool, all three of us were nauseated, and I had a terrific headache, and my eyes were killing me. I was noticing white halos around all the lights outside, and around all the lights. It's like when you put your head under chlorine, and then you open your eyes, and then your eyes are all blown for a while. Only I didn't put my head under water or open my eyes. So we abandoned our swimming gig, and eventually they went home and I went to bed. And the next morning when I woke up, I was so sick and my eyes were completely swelled shut. And so my mom actually ended up taking me to the emergency room. From the emergency room, I was taken to an eye doctor whose office was across the street from the emergency room. Uh, he said he didn't have the equipment there to look at me, but would look at me in his office. So they took me over there. One of the first things he asked me is if I had looked into the arc of a welder's torch, which I was like, no. Why? Why would I do that? That's dumb. But so he prescribed me creams and drops, and my eyes, it took several weeks for my eyes to heal. I think that the diagnosis that he gave was like severe conjunctivitis. And I do believe he was like, "I can't believe that they didn't bother you yesterday to be this bad today." I said, "No, when I went to bed, they felt kind of weird, but not like this." So,
Well, Debbie, if I could ask a quick question.
mhm.
So, excuse me. The so all this happened while during that day you had, this occur, and then that same days when you were like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna then just call up my friend and have her come over instead." Is that just am I understanding that correctly?
That's the same evening, yeah. I
Okay.
went over earlier to sew, then I came back to investigate whatever it was that my mom got upset about, and then I went back to her house, but I told her I really didn't feel like sewing, "So you guys wanna come over and go swimming?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's just do that." So then we went back over to my mom and dad's house and got in the pool. It was I think I went back to my mom's house around 8-ish in the evening. It was dark. And then I think by the time, I went back to Deanna's and then went back, to my mom and dad's house again, it was pretty close to around 11:30 at night because my dad either had just gotten home from work or was just about, or got home right after we got there, and, he worked second shift. So,
So other
yeah,
than
that all
the
happened the same night.
I see. So other than the side effects, all you were pretty much doing is observing this happening, correct? That's
Well,
all,
yeah,
or do you was there more there?
I I never fully remembered the whole. I think Bud, after he talked to my friend and her husband and my mom and dad and everybody, he determined there was maybe about an hour and 15 minutes where I was actually missing. Like there was just the whole time was not there, wasn't there for me. It actually, even my friends who lived the house over, the girl I went to sew with, her and her husband seemed how be somehow affected by this time shift thing because they weren't even aware that I had been gone that long
And of course, your
until
mom was there too, correct?
right, and
Okay.
she wasn't aware that I had that much time had passed. So, you know, now the next day, when I woke up sick, and then by that weekend, which was the 4th of July weekend, which was a few days, the family came over, and we're all going to swim and have a cookout and light off an obscene amount of fireworks from Kmart in your backyard and try not to set your house on fire. You know what I mean? That's what Americans do.
Right.
But so the kids all head out with their bathing suits, and my nephew comes running back in. He's like, "Grandma, what's wrong with your yard? Oh my God!" And so the grown-ups went running out there, and there was the mark in the yard, fully developed, fully formed, right there in your face. And my mom looks at me and says, "Oh, that's where the UFO landed the other night." And I went, "What? Excuse me?" I looked at her kind of weird, but the moment I looked at her and then I looked back at that mark again, you you could have knocked me over with a feather. It hit me like a ton of bricks.
Mhm.
I started to remember some stuff. It was like at that moment somebody pulled the finger out of the dam and here came the trickle. I remember standing there looking at that mark, and all I could suddenly see were two huge black eyes, eyes that I had seen before. Uh,
Prior to that day?
yes. Uh, and it was just like, I think at that moment is when I began to have what I say was a nervous breakdown. Um, I started before I had conscious memories of some things of that night. I started having remembering the fear and the terror. You know what I mean? And that night, I didn't. Well, let me just put it this way: I probably didn't sleep for a month. Honestly, at night, I would sit up all night long between my two children's beds in their room, like I was waiting.
Hmm.
And there was a bathroom in my mom's house that overlooked that mark in the yard on the second floor. I couldn't go to the bathroom in that bathroom at night. At night, I couldn't go. I'd have to go all the way down the basement to use the bathroom because there was a window in that bathroom that overlooked that mark in the yard. And I don't know why, but I felt this overwhelming terror that something was going to come through that window and take me. It was pathetic, and I felt crazy.
So
And
this is all what came
yeah,
back to you after this visual
June.
experience. That you started
Yes.
remembering more and more happening. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Not only did I remember more, I started to remember things that happened years ago
Oh wow.
that things that, you just put away. Let's face it, life is weird. And this world that we live in is weird. And weird things happen every day to everyone. If you can honestly tell me that you've lived any time on this earth at all and not had at least one little weird thing happen, then I'd say you're not paying attention.
Hmm.
But, they, so I started remembering things like one of my first things I remembered was back when I was first married. And these two gray things came in my room at night while I was laying in bed next to my husband, but he never woke up or moved. And they came into my room and they had the same kind of eyes that I saw over the mark in the yard, the big, big black, liquidy, shimmery, alive eyes. That's what I call them. The eyes are like living things, you know. They look into you, not just at you. But, Yeah, I remembered that came back to me, that dream, and I even asked my ex-husband, because he was my ex-husband at that point, "Do you remember when I woke you up and told you that?" And he goes, "Yeah, I thought you had food poisoning or something, because that was a crazy dream." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, well, I just wanted confirmation that you remembered that I told you about this, you know?"
Right, right.
But, um, yeah, they just came into my room. That was the time the 2 of them came into my room. They just kind of appeared in my room by where the window was. They came to the bed, and I remember thinking to myself that same terror that I felt when that craft thing was close to me. Please just don't come any closer to me. Don't touch me, and I might be able to hold it together. You know,
Mm,
I'll be all right. Just don't touch me. Don't come any closer. But as they got closer to me, I felt calmer. And they said, and this was back in, let's see, it was probably back in '78 because I was married, very new, married. He said he had a black box in his hand, about the size of a shoebox, more or less, and it had a red light. L- It looked like it was down inside this thing, but there was like a hole on top, maybe about, I don't know, size of a cookie cutter. But I remember asking, "What is this? Can I have it?" And they're like, "No, you can't. But when you see it again, you will remember it and you will know how to use it." And I said, "Okay." And then they were gone. At one point I didn't freak out. I mean, I freaked out when I first saw them, but then it was like some kind of calmness came over me. Well, I forgot all about that crazy dream
right.
until the mark in the yard. Then, and then there were other things. When I was a child, I went on a little weekend jaunt with my older sister up to Michigan, and I was missing for an entire day. They had to call the police to try and find me, and my sister ended up finding me and bringing me back home. The only memory I have of that day and of being missing is being with a little boy my size, but he had big black eyes, and he wanted me to come into a room with him and play with these weird toys. And then when we were playing, something bit me on the leg. It's what I felt like, something poked me in the leg. And then I remember all of a sudden I'm by the door of the house that we were in, and his mother come out, and she was mad as hell that I was there and said, "Why is she here? She doesn't belong here. She needs to leave right now." Boom. And it felt like someone shoved me out the door, but yet no one touched me. And at the end of the walkway from this house, there stood my sister. I walked up to her. I'm like, "That, oh, sissy." She never had any kind of a reaction emotionally. She never said anything to me. She just took my hand, walked me back to the house I was supposed to be at. You know, I mean, all these things I remembered, things like this flooding back because of that mark in the yard. And then I started remembering other things. I remembered a time. Uh, it was right before my first husband and I got married, and it was in the fall, and me and 2 other girls were in a car out in the country on the far east side of Indy. Uh, w I was like 16, I was 17, early 17, so but my friends were a little bit older, and we were actually gonna stalk her boyfriend because she thought he was messing around on her. So, like 2 in the morning, we're out driving around the country, 3 teenage girls looking, because the boy lived out in the country in a farmhouse. So we're out driving around stalking her boyfriend, and, we see a light in the sky acting weird, and it got really big, and the girl in the back seat actually flipped out. She got panicky and went hysterical on us and was down on the floorboard crying and begging us to drive away. And Dolores was laughing at her. And I was like, "Oh, look, that's a UFO," trying to be funny. And then all of a sudden, this thing gets really big. And I remember we pulled over. I did not remember Dolores getting out of the car, but I do remember our car being enveloped in some kind of black smoke or black cloud. And I remember being pulled out of the car by my legs and, drugged somewhere. and I remembered, um, like, being on a table in a operating theater and having painful stuff done to me, and, um, then the next thing I remember, we're back in the car, and we're driving away, and old girl is still in the back whimpering, and Dolores is not saying much, and, then years later, and we never spoke of it again. We never spoke of that whole thing, that whole incident. And then years later, when Bud came and to investigate, we actually hadn't talked to Dolores for years, but I managed to get a hold of her through my older sister, and we had a meeting with Bud. And Bud asked her about that night, and he says, "I want to talk to you about the light in the that you girls saw out in the country." And she goes, "You mean the one in the sky or the one on the ground?" And I looked over and I'm like, "What do you mean the one on the ground? I didn't remember seeing anything on the ground." And she goes, "Oh yeah." She goes, "I we pulled over and I got out of the car." And she goes, "The light was on the ground in the field." I'm like, "What?" I didn't even remember that part. She did. She did not she did not wanna do hypnosis. She says, "Look, I have lived with it for these many years, and it hasn't bothered me. I see no sense in stirring it up now. I don't want to remember any more than I already do. I'm good with not remembering." She goes, "But she says, "I will tell you that night happened. I was there." So,
Debbie, a question regarding so listening to your story, and maybe you could maybe get a little bit into the work then that you've done with Bud Hopkins. Were you able to determine if that event was done somehow on purpose for you to start remembering, or do you have any thoughts regarding that?
no, that's a good I that's I always say, I have said many times before, that night, something in me changed. Uh, I called myself Debbie 2.0 at that point. It's like a part of me died and a new part of me was born.
Mm.
I don't know exactly what happened that night. It was definitely the most physically, it affected me physically the most. Um, m- it I like, it's a hypothesis, it's a theory that perhaps that night happened to wake me up and start this whole process, and the market that was left in the yard was left there for a purpose, to because that's having the pictures of the mark in the yard is actually what finally got me to write Bud Hopkins. I probably wouldn't have even written him had I not been able to have actual some physical evidence, to send to him. So, that's very possible that that night was intentional to wake me up, or make some kind of change in me,
Right.
you know, to facilitate this whole next journey.
So with your work with Bud Hopkins, were you able to figure out why and what else was going on, throughout all these years of these different odd contexts,
Yeah.
besides what you already have covered?
Well, I was my whole family was a little unique. They're all very smart. They all have different kinds of gifts. And it's very our DNA is very mixed. There's a lot of everything in us, and there are a lot of theories that some of this contact is uh, follows families, and I can say that my mother did have strange experience as a child that she talked to Bud about, which I don't really know a whole lot about because I wasn't in the room when she talked to him, but I heard about it later that she had a strange memory of being a child in the woods and a little boy, funny enough, a little boy caused her to fall and poke herself and get her hurt her leg, and she got the same mark in her leg on the same leg that I had when I played with my little boy. So there's that. Um, and I guess genetic connections, familial family connections are kind of common in abduction reports. Usually it's like a kid, a person like me, but then like my mom, and then maybe her mom or her father has had experiences. So it looks like it could run in families. I mean, nobody really knows for sure. I we just don't. That's just a fact, but it kind of looks like that. Um, some people say I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some people say I was in the right place at the right time. Depends on your perspective and what you want. But I think I was just born this way, and you know, it, it's weird because my mom had my sister, and then she never had any more children for like almost 12 years, 11 years, and wanted more, tried for more, never happened. But the minute they moved over here to where we called the UFO house, which was in a neighborhood where people used to climb up on the roof and look at the sky, uh, I was conceived and born. And then 14 months later, my brother was born. And then I think like 14 months after him, my little sister was born. So,
Hmm.
uh, you know, I don't, maybe they helped us get here. I don't know. It's nobody knows. Um, I hate to throw out theories and stuff because I don't want anybody to think that I really actually know what, because I don't. I can tell you what I've experienced, and I can tell you what I remember, but beyond that, it's my opinion and my theory, and it may or may not jive with somebody else's.
So, Debbie, all these different interactions, were they always with these small, big eyed beings, or was there anyone else?
Most of mine were with
Hmm.
this particular type, and I almost got the feeling after a while, you know, I've seen the same one several times over the course of my life. I'm 62 years old. Uh, he never changed. I call him a he, but I don't know for sure. All of them look exactly the same. But it almost was a familiar feeling to him. And in retrospect, I think about it now, and I'm a believer in time travel because of things I've felt about time in period, and dimensions. And I just feel like maybe it's possible that these people are from our far, far future, and maybe that's my great, 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 great to the 10th power grandson. I don't know. Maybe that's why they felt so familiar with me. But
Right, just visiting.
yeah, or trying to fix something,
Right.
you know. Uh, but my sister, interestingly enough, my older sister who's had these experiences, hers have been mostly the people that look like the mantis type.
Hmm.
I don't have anything like that. Now I have had some experiences with people who look like human beings, very beautiful, um, and kind, glowy people almost. And I've also seen, uh, in the peripheral, tall, dark-haired, dark-eyed people, but they look like humans, basically. I mean, they could probably pass. They could walk around on in the street and nobody would pay them much mind, except maybe on the blonde ones, like they're so pretty. But I've had a couple of interactions with something like that. I've also had interaction with something that I feel is was I don't think it was a ghost. I don't think it was an alien. I don't know. I think it was something that lives in some other dimension because when it passed through the hallway, it really wasn't it really didn't seem like it even knew I was there. It was just passing through, and it kind of just flickered in and then flickered out, and it was all blue, and it seemed like it passed through this invisible door jam where it went away, and I'm like, it was at that point I thought I had inadvertently seen something that I probably wasn't supposed to or shouldn't have been able to see. Let me put it that way.
Right.
And it was some other dimensional thing, So I think there's a bunch of stuff going on with a bunch of different kind of creatures. I have not had any contact with anything. People talk about reptilians. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, so I can't speak on that. I know people that think they have or have said that they have, but that's not something that I've had any kind of interaction with.
Right.
It's been mostly the gray um, people, I guess. For I don't know what else to call them. I call them those little guys most of the time.
Right. Well, Debbie, do you what was it? What did you cover in this upcoming book? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I do include parts of my old book that I first wrote back in the 80s. Um, so I go back and I cover some of the things that I've talked about tonight here, the Mark of the Yard and some of the older stuff. But I also have included in this new book some parts of my everyday life, things that have happened in my everyday life, my work life, with friends, paranormal events that have happened surrounding the death of my husband and my mom, and some of the experiences I've had as a paranormal investigator. Like, for instance, I and I told you I do a lot of EVP work, and I feel like um, some of the things that I've recorded, I don't necessarily think they ever lived here on this planet. I wouldn't call them ghosts. I'm not quite sure who they are, where they are, but I had an epiphany once during one of my earliest EVP recording sessions. My nephew and I actually recorded the voice of an old man who said, "Are the spirits listening?" And then right after that, immediately after that, we recorded a voice of a child that said, "Can I listen too?" And it was, I had an epiphany in that moment. I realized I am the spirit that somebody somewhere else is listening for right now.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, that's interesting.
and that's when I got excited about the whole paranormal research thing, because I don't think that some of that is what people think it is. I don't go to assume that everything that we have been or that we get in contact with has lived here before ever. And I don't mean just demons and stuff like that. I'm talking about other. I believe that we can, in some instances, maybe accidentally contact, another dimension for a brief moment. I drew a picture one time, and the picture will be in my book, of a cluster of soap bubbles. And I called it Casey's Bubbles because my youngest son absolutely loved soap bubbles. We played with them all the time. And I had one of those Close Encounter of the Third Time moments. What the guy's name in Close Encounters, when he does the mashed potato thing and he has that moment.
Right.
I had a kind of a
That's
moment with
classic.
soap. I had a kind yeah, I had a kind of a moment with soap bubbles like that when I was messing around with them with my kids, and that's what I ended up drawing, and I called it that. But in my mind, as I drew them, I'm thinking each one of those bubbles is a universe or a dimension, a multiverse, each one, and they're all hung together in a cluster. And everywhere that they touch, that little flat, smooth surface that where it looks like both two bubbles have become one, and they touch, however fleeting and brief, it's not permanent. Eventually one bubble pops or they slide around as they drop or move, so that little spot where these bubbles touch moves. And in my mind, something was saying to me in my brain, it's that spot where the two meet that you can communicate. It's not permanent, it's fleeting, it moves around. But there's people on the other side who know this, and they're actively working on equipment to, they know we're here. And I think there might be some people here that know they're there,
Mhm.
or at least in one of these bubbles. You know what I'm saying? And I think that some of the EVPs I've recorded have actually been not ghosts or dead people who used to be here, but some something from one of those bubbles, as I call them.
Well,
That's when I
it
got all
seems like
excited about.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, it seems like that mashed potato moment, or in your case, that bubble moment. There's always something that I guess triggers something hidden, and as you're trying to understand what that is, it kind of makes you look from and someone outside kind of weird because you're just staring at it or doing something weird like in the mashed potato time, and but instead you're just
Absolutely.
remembering and trying to deal with this internal feelings that are just wreaking havoc with you.
Right. And I'm like, I mean, it was at that point in my life too when I got very interested in physics, and string theory, quantum physics, all the crazy part of physics. And I started to read things about it. I haven't read so much lately. Life has a way of yanking my chain and dragging me everywhere else I don't want to be. Um, but I, and I have no clue what I'm reading. Mind you, when I read these books, I don't know what any of this stuff means, but I read it because I feel like it needs to be up in here, and eventually I'll figure it out. But so and then so that was a triggering moment for me when I had my Roy. I think his name was Roy, but I had my Roy moment with the bubbles. But that's my mind just kind of opened up at that point. But anyway, that all is in my new book that I talk about this kind of stuff, and my theory about what I think human beings are and where we're headed. And my theory, I don't I let me say about everything that I share with everybody. I will tell you what I remember. I'll tell you what I know in the best way I know how. I'm not the best uh, I don't know all the best, biggest words, but I'll tell you what I remember, what I know, and then I'll tell you what I think. But I want you to understand that it's my opinion. It's not a fact. I don't know. I don't know who I've had contact with. I don't know where they're from. I don't know what the agenda is. I suspect it could be multiple different agendas for a variety of different things. I think there are a bunch of stuff going on, not just one thing. So, but all that I talk about in my new book, and how the experience has shaped me and has affected my whole life, not just the paranormal part of it, but my whole life. Honest to God, had it not been for Bud Hopkins and meeting him, even regardless of the experience in June of '83, had I not met Bud, there is not one single thing about my life right now that would be in existence. I can't even imagine how my life would be without it. So even though the early parts of my UFO experiences and paranormal experiences were scary, I wouldn't trade them for the world, because they're the reason I have this life I have now, the husband I have, the grandkids I have. I mean, nothing about my life would be the way it is now. So and I talk about all of this. I talk about how I've survived it. I talk about how I've used it to make me a better person, a stronger person, and a more I don't know, enlightened person. For I don't know how to put it. That sounds kind of corny and hokey, but I've become less religious and more spiritual as I've gone through this
Hmm.
process. And I want people out there who are like me, who've had a life like me, who are having a life like mine right now, to know they're not alone. I was blessed and so fortunate and grateful to have support of my family, my neighbors, my coworkers, my employers, pretty much everyone in my immediate circle. I was very fortunate to have all this support, and I know most people don't.
Hmm.
And I want to pay that forward.
Debbie, what do you say we go into some question and answers? But I want to just make that quick announcement that we get into that stage. But and I have a question for you that I hope you can get to first. But to anyone watching, if you simply put three stars before you in the chat, 3 stars before your question, that way I know you're referring or have a question for the guest, and then I'll just go down the list, whoever has some questions for Debbie. But Debbie, the question I wanted to ask specifically, when you first started working with Bud Hopkins, what was some of the first things that, I guess, kind of were revealed to you with through the hypnosis process?
Well, when I first started to work with Bud and I went to New York for the first time, uh, the first couple of hypnosis sessions I had were actually with Dr. Clamar. I think her name was Aphrodite Clamar. She was a psychologist or psychotherapist or something that I don't know how Bud met her or got her involved, but he took me to see her. Very nice woman, very calm and quiet and patient. And her intention, I think, was to just show me. I was very leery of the whole hypnosis thing. My sister had had a very bad experience the one that had the experience, the contact extraterrestrial in 65. She years later tried to be hypnotized to, I don't know whether it was quit smoking or lose weight, might have been to lose weight. Went with a friend and to this, like they used to have those group hypnotherapy things to lose weight and whatnot. And she did that. And her friend, yeah, it was to lose weight. Her friend did great, but when Kathy came home that night, she didn't feel right, and she was like, when she woke up, she couldn't speak, she couldn't move. It was like she was having seizures. I mean, she was messed up for a long time. And so that was in the back of my mind. I'm like, I don't want no part of that because I don't know if her reaction to that weight loss hypnosis was because of her UFO stuff. But Dr. Kumar calmed me down and reassured me hypnosis is simply an extremely relaxed state of mind and that I won't do anything uh, under hypnosis that I wouldn't do consciously. I mean, it wouldn't go against my morals or anything like that. Uh, and the first couple of sessions I had with her, really, I didn't remember anything. She just took me to a relaxed place and then let me see how it felt and then brought me back, you know. And then with Bud, basically, he did basically the same thing that Dr. Clamar did. He used the same technique, and he kind of just, let me be in a relaxed place. And then uh, I don't really, I didn't really remember a whole bunch of anything in any of our sessions. There might be one or two sessions where I remembered some stuff, but the majority of what I remembered usually came after the session for like 2 weeks. Cause it was like once I kind of opened that door in there, uh, it would be like I would go home from New York and then all of a sudden something would trigger a memory and I'd be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot that." And my mom and I used to sit and have conversations about stuff that I was remembering after coming home from New York, and my mom would be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe we forgot that," you know? So,
I'm kind of
m
I'm going back on my original message saying that I'll ask you one more question and move on with Q&A. But I do want to ask you about did Bud record any of these regression sessions?
yes,
So
all of them were recorded.
did you
Yeah,
by any
I
chance
don't
get a hold of yours?
No,
Mm.
I never had a copy of mine, but every session that I did have with Bud, and I didn't have that many because I mean he lived in New York and I lived in Indiana. So I mean there wasn't that many opportunities to have, hypnotherapy with him. So I think maybe there might have been or six sessions total. I'm maybe not even that many. Um, they were all recorded and there was always someone there. It wasn't just him and me. I know one time Tracy Torme sat in on one of the sessions. Of course, Dr. Kumar was in on one and but there was always somebody else in there with me and him and he recorded everything, but I do not have, sadly, I don't have those tapes. I also don't have uh a lot of the artwork that I gave him, that I did, that I have pictures of, which I have photographs of them and the photographs in my book of some of the artwork I did. But then I gave him all of my original stuff and it's all gone.
Mm.
I don't know what happened to all his stuff when he passed away. So
Okay.
I don't have any of it, sadly.
Well, there's one question that came through from Fabrizio. He's asking, with night terrors, intrusions, and predator feel to it, is this a legit feel to it, or need to reevaluate our personal perspective. If does that make sense?
I'm not I'm not quite clear on that.
I
Can
think
you help me?
I think he's asking particularly about the terrors. If that's the genuine feeling that you should be feeling, or is it just our perspective that makes it scary? If I'm
Oh,
Yeah, I
right.
think that's
Uh,
what he's asking.
okay. Yeah, well, like I said, I would not have those experiences again. And then I look at some of that as, I mean, like now, I wouldn't be afraid, but I would certainly be startled. I mean, because you don't expect that. Just the sheer something coming at you that you never seen before, you don't know anything about. I mean, you're going to be startled, and your first thought as a human being is, "Go, is this thing going to kill me and eat me?" Or, I mean, I think that's a normal reaction to anything. And then I think to myself, look, when a child goes to the doctor, and the doctor gives that child a vaccination, that child doesn't know what that vaccination is for. He doesn't know why this man is doing this to him. It hurts. The kid screams and he's scared and he cries. But the doctor and the mother know this is good. This is a good thing for this child. This is going to, save this child's life later. So I kind of feel like it in that some way. I don't in any instance feel as if anything that might have been done to me that was harmful or scared me was intentional.
Mm,
I do not feel that at all. I do not feel any kind of malice or negative. I feel like my fear was my own not knowing what was going on and what was happening and not understanding. That's where my fear and terror come from, and my basic primal instincts of not die, when you're faced with something unknown, it's scary. But like I said, in the bigger picture, I don't believe that anything that was ever done to me was done in malice with bad intent.
okay. So the next question I have is from M. Roland. Says, "Did your encounters feel like dreams originally?" Sorry, I missed most of the live show. I guess that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah. My I have always referred to many of them as dreams. Mostly, and it would irritate researchers to no end, but look, I got to live with it. I have to make it. I have to live with it. And there's some things that even now I have a hard time uh with. But I will tell you, a lot of it wasn't a dream. I wasn't anywhere close to asleep. And the I have had some what I call vivid dreams. They're not the same as a regular dream. In those dreams, I'm in the dream, I'm participating in it. It's very vivid, it's color, it's 3D. And once I wake up, I remember it. And the longer I'm awake, the more of it I remember, and it never goes away. When I have a regular dream, I might wake up and think, "Oh, I had a dream. It was kind of weird." But like an hour later, I don't even remember having a dream.
Mm,
So I have these two different things. And uh, some of my weird stuff is that second or that first kind of vivid dream. But, sometimes I think when I go to sleep, I go somewhere else. So I don't know, if maybe I'm going somewhere else in my spirit, I mean, and having these experiences. I don't know. I don't know that either. I'm just not very helpful.
well, I mean, it's difficult trying to figure it out when these events just constantly. It's not like you remember everything in a chronological order. You just all of a sudden this pops in or that pops in, and this happened different times, different decades
Right.
sometimes. So can't blame you for not having it fully all figured out. But
I
uh,
probably never going to fully all figure it out. I'm still a work in progress as far as my growth, and I occasionally might pop up remember something that happened, 45 years ago, and I'm like, "What? I can't remember what I had for dinner yesterday, but I can remember something that happened 45 years ago. What's
right,
that?"
right. Well, I just want to quickly remind everyone in the description below, Debbie's website is there, and also the publisher's page where there's some more info about the book. I'll stay in touch with Debbie, and we'll get that updated when, if and when, well, when the book goes live. And so that way there's a direct buy link there. But yeah, check that out while you're watching the show. So, Debbie, while I'm waiting for another question, I wanted to ask you, do you have you recently still had some contacts, or do you think as majority of it has just subsided and you're allowed to kind of go back to your normal life?
Well, there were a few times in my life when I actually actively tried to stop it and stay away, and I didn't want to talk about it with anybody for periods of time. But somehow the phenomenon always found me and kind of drop kicked me right back into it. This point in my life now, I haven't had any physical, you know, contact that I'm aware of. Um, I've been having, I guess I call them psychic moments, little visions and psychic. I guess you want to call it psychic, you know, um, and spiritual things happening. Um, but it's not that I'm not open to it now. It's just that I don't know that it's necessary anymore. I think that it's like my contact has gradually over the years moved from a physical to a an energetic, maybe level, and now I'm focused. Now that I'm retired, like I said, life has a way of yanking your chain and dragging you around where you really not necessarily want to be, but you got to pay the bills.
Right.
So for 15 years, I worked in a factory, and it not only beat my body up, but it consumed a lot of time in my life. When the pandemic came, I tried to find a silver lining in that cloud, and in that 7 or 8 weeks my plant was shut down. I actually finished the book that I started on years before. And so now I'm retired, and everything is dovetailing all at once. As a matter of fact, actually, the publisher that's doing my book, August Night Press, just I think last week, re-released Intruders and Missing Time, two of Bud's classic books, for to be reprinted and to be purchased. So now those are available on Amazon and all fine online book places. And I think it's great. Obviously, it helps me because Intruders was my life,
If
in
you can send
his
me that
story.
link,
But
I'll put it in the description below later on.
okay. And but I think it's great for a whole new crop of young people who are interested in the subject now, to be able to have these really, you know, pioneering books, especially Missing Time, um, to be able to read. And anybody who's interested seriously in UFOs really needs to have these books in their library. And if you don't have a library anymore, I think you can get it on Kindle too. But the climate has changed so much in 35 years. When I first came out publicly, I really wasn't all that thrilled about it, and had to have a little coaxing by Bud. But the thought of helping other people was eventually more powerful than me, and I succumbed to it and decided to go ahead and let my story be public. I
Mm.
took one from my family team. Nobody else wanted to go around and talk about it, so I did. And but they supported me. And now, I mean, but you wouldn't think of wearing a alien head on a t-shirt by any means, or even talking about it without whispering, in a public area. And now it's like, it's cool. I mean, you go to Walmart and buy a lunchbox with alien heads on them,
Right.
and there's a dozen television shows on talking about them, and they have huge followings. And so the climate has changed, people are changing. So it's almost like, like me, I'm changing and becoming different, and growing from all this. And I think humanity as a whole is too at this time. So,
Right. Well, talking about shows, one of the other questions from Melinda was, I watched a documentary with you in it. You talked about children. Can you speak about it?
um, yes. When I was married to my first husband, the one who I had was married to when I had that with the 2 guys that came in the bedroom, um, before we got married, I found out I was pregnant. We had intended on getting married and having a wedding in June, but we moved it up to April because I found out I was pregnant. And, I was a few months along and I had a strange dream, and I called it a dream because it was one of those vivid dream-like things. But the next morning when I woke up, I felt like there was something wrong with my baby. I checked myself and everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling. And I started to remember little bits and pieces of some kind of a medical procedure, and remembered feeling angry and mad and terrified. And um, so my girlfriend, again, the same gal that I rode around in the country stalking her boyfriend, um, she says to me, "Come on, I'll take you to Planned Parenthood. You get a pregnancy test. Um, it'll say you're pregnant, and you can calm down and shut up." So I went. I had the pregnancy test there. It was negative, and the gal was telling me, if you don't have your period in the next week, you need to see your physician. At that point, I was like out of my mind, crying. So I went, and my girlfriend was trying to console me, and she took me home. I told my mom something was wrong and I needed to go to the doctor right away. So she took me to the doctor. I The doctor gave me another pregnancy test and another exam, and then he had me go into this little office with my mom. And he told my mom that I was not pregnant, that he wasn't sure what happened, but we see this a lot. It's not that big a deal. Basically, he looked at me and said, "You're young. You're going to have other kids. If I were you, I would just forget this ever happened." And my mom is like, "Well, wait, does she need to have like a D&C or something?" It's like, "No, everything looks fine." So I remember saying to him, "I am never going to forget this as long as I live." And we walked out of that place and we never spoke of it again. Never. And then years later, during the investigation, I have no clue why I started thinking about this pregnancy, and I blurted it out to Bud one day, and I immediately regretted it because I saw the look on his face was one of first horror and then, "Oh my god, she's crazy, poor thing." And he's like, "Well, I'm sorry, that you went through that." And I thought, "Oh god, I'm crazy, I'm stupid." And I said, "I have no idea why I'm even mentioning this to you, and I don't know why it is feels like I need to tell you this." Well, years later, I I had dreams of someone in a medical setting taking my baby. I had further down the road, I dreamed of seeing a child with these little guys that didn't look like them, looked more like a regular human being. Um, and somehow feeling or being told that that was my baby, that was my kid. And but that sounds crazy, and I couldn't accept it and I still have a hard time with it. First of all, I lost a baby that I was hoping to have and then was getting used to being pregnant, and that was hard enough in and of itself. But the weird dreams around it were even more strange. And at first I didn't want Bud to put any of it in the book because it was embarrassing. And I'm like, I don't want people I don't I don't want to talk about this. We didn't talk about it for, years. And I don't know why I even told you. But eventually I guess he started having people contacting him, women contacting him that were having similar things happen, and some even more, way more extraordinary than mine. And so you know e eventually, I gave him permission to include it in the book. When he first wrote the book, I'm like, "No, I don't want that in there. Don't put that in there. I don't wanna talk about it." But I finally let him do it. So, And then I had dreams of seeing, another child. I I thought it was mine. It was a different one, but I don't remember how this child came to be, and I don't remember having any dreams about it. So, you know, Bud's theory was that that was some kind of hybrid between us and them. I don't know. Maybe it was, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. And so
Well,
I try to live with the memory, and I try to live with the fact that I've told the whole world about it. Now I look like an idiot, but you know, it is what it is. And I mean, I have the medical records from
well, Debbie, I think
when
it's
I
not
was pregnant. So
any. How can it be any crazier after you already just experienced all these different things you just told us earlier? It's like, it's just
I
the
don't
next
know. Like,
evolution. Well, it's
yeah, it feels crazier than just the mark in the yard and all the other stuff.
Well, sometimes you just have to still, you still have to mention it, talk about it, because just because
Yeah.
someone else at that time hasn't had that experience, it doesn't mean that it's not real in some way, And of course, we don't know, but the point is, who knows? By you saying something, doing something for the first time, you are the trailblazer.
The fact is, I was pregnant. My doctor and my mom and I actually even had a conversation about how he thought I might be a little farther along than I thought I was. And I was young. I wasn't even 18 yet. So I didn't know nothing about pregnancy. Really wasn't looking to get pregnant at that
Mm.
time, but it was what it was. And so and then all of a sudden I wasn't, and there was no explanation for it. And the only thing I had left were these horrible nightmares for years with it, so I called them nightmares. But so it is what it is. It happened, and I don't know what to make of it sometimes, and I don't expect other people to figure out what to make of it. I know Bud had his theory. I know Dave Jacobs has his theories. I know a lot of people have their theories, and that's great.
Was
I
was that the only instance that you remember or that you know of?
That's the only one that was like that. Yeah, the only time that I know of that I was actually pregnant. I mean, then I had my son. Not too long after that, I got pregnant with my son, and then that was a horrible mess. I almost died. He was born by emergency C-section when I was 7 months pregnant. And then, shortly after him, I got pregnant with the other kid, and my baby making days was over by the time I was 23 years old. They had to take all my insides out. The doctor said I was trashed. So that was actually the word that the doctor used when he did my hysterectomy. He said, "You were trashed."
Mm.
I'm like, "Okay." But
Yeah, I
But
know.
yeah, that was the only time. That
Right.
first pregnancy was the weird one.
That's very emotional, though, especially when you know that you were, having a baby. Because I know my wife and I, we had a miscarriage, and it's so weird that even though you never seen the baby, you know it's coming, but then understanding that it's not going to be born, it's a feeling like like a like a
It's
like it's
devastating.
a devastating, but it's like a person that you have known. Although I've never seen a baby, just the thought and knowledge that it was there and not there anymore.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
feel your pain. I'm sorry that that
You know
happened
that
to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I always said it's hard to talk about it because I mean it was a lot harder, 25 or 30 years ago than it is now. But I mean, it still
How
hurts.
societal standards change, huh?
Yeah, and people have to remember when I'm talking about it, first and foremost, I was a young woman who lost a baby. So keep that in mind, because that baby was real. That baby was there. And I have doctor records and medical, tests, results and everything else, pelvic exam. The baby was there. And then when it was gone, I was heartbroken. I had, you know, I will. I'll tell you what, let me put it this way. After that, after I lost that baby, every month that I had a period, I cried like a baby until finally I got pregnant again. All I could think of was having all I ever wanted in life was to be a mom. That was my number one goal in life, was to be a mother. And so yeah, after I had that, after I lost that first baby, I was, it was really hard. And then to have to, that's the main reason I didn't want to talk about it. I don't even, I could smack myself in the head a million times over for ever mentioning it to Bud, because I have no idea why I connected it all. And then everything started to come in. So, I mean, all the, the memories, the
Right,
dreams.
right,
So,
right. Well, Deb, I apologize. Just before we continue, could you please do me a favor? And I think if you could turn a bit to your right, then you'll be more centered on my screen. There you go.
okay.
Yep. Yeah, you were
I
going.
wiggle around a
That's
lot.
okay. I just figured uh, that way, since everyone else is watching, they'll have you in a better position. Just a little bit more to your right, I think.
To my right,
Yeah,
like
there you go.
this.
Yep. Thank you very much. Perfect. You're centered now. So the next question I have is from Michael J. Schumann. Asks, where are all those hybrids now? Are they here to be liaisons between us and ETs, or are they inhabiting some other planet?
I don't know. I honestly cannot tell you. I do not know.
Hmm. Right.
I
Yeah.
would love to be able to see that first pregnancy again, that girl, but I don't know where they are or what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a good question because there's still depends on from person to person and who had these experiences. There's different stories on that, but I wish there was, like with everything, that there was a little bit more concrete information regarding. It's like where are they going? Are they hanging out with them? Are they doing something else?
But she ain't hanging out with me.
Mm,
So I don't know. I don't know where.
okay.
I can't. I'm sorry. I can't answer that question. I don't have an answer.
The other one is another one from Fabrizio asking, have you had um I'm sorry, the spelling on it is kind of jumbled around. Have you had dreams of your child to come? Was it outwardly? Fabrice, I'm sorry, if you can please reformat that question one more time for me, then I can ask it. It's a bit confusing. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Um, so yeah, Debbie. So the I mean, was there? Do you sometimes, speaking of dreams, do you sometimes do dream of that girl older? And I mean, have there been any kind of interactions in that way, or was that basically those instances and then that was it?
One time when I lived in the apartment complex, so that has to have been, oh, I don't know, over 20 years, maybe 25 or 30 years ago. I had a dream. It actually wasn't even a dream. This actually happened. I was sitting in my kitchen. I'm sorry. And I was drinking a cup of coffee, and I was sitting in front of the patio door. And there it was it was a privacy fence around my little tiny backyard in my apartment. And there were like slats on the privacy fence. And you could see when people and kids would walk by, you could see their shoes. You could see them through the slats, because there was big gaps. And I felt something funny, and I looked up, and there was a kid, probably the height maybe of a 9-year-old or something, aged the height anyway. I think it was a kid. I thought it was a kid. And I could see her looking at me through the slat, and I saw one eye, and it was very blue, big eye, and she had lots of white hair, blonde, super white, super blonde hair. And she was wearing all dark clothes, dark pants, dark shirts, even dark shoes. And I thought, what the hell is that kid looking at? And then I thought, something feels weird. And then I realized, why does that child have on all black? And I stood up and I started to go outside. And as I stood up, she took off. And when she took off running, I ran out the back door, opened up the gate, and I ran behind the alleyway, of grass between the two different buildings with our um, privacy fences that butted up against each other's. Kind of. I mean, there was a walk path. Ran down to the end of the building and looked both ways. There was nobody. That kid had to be like flying.
Mm.
And after she left, it dawned on me I'd never seen any kid like that in the neighborhood or around the apartments, and I never saw after that. And something in my mind thought, was that her? In my mind. I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was her, but for some reason it came up after all these years. That was the last time that I remembered anything or thought about her, except occasionally I would think about she would be uh 42 years old now. She wouldn't be she's no little girl.
Mm.
She'd be 43 maybe. My oldest son is 41. So she'd be like 40, maybe 43 years old now. So,
Oh, wow.
you know, there's something always in the back of my mind. I always thought if she was if that was her, if that dream I had was really her, if that was her that I saw in the apartments that day, if that was her, I hope and pray in the back of my mind that there's a little piece of her inside that would want to seek me out and find me
Mm.
eventually, you know. But that's all I got.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question from Roland says, should we fear the extraterrestrials or not? Like Stephen Greer believes we have nothing to worry about.
You know what? Again, I don't know. I can tell you my experience, and from my perspective, whatever I've had contact with, you know, if it had wanted to destroy me, it could have easily years ago. And so, and like I said, I always felt like there wasn't any intentional harm done to me. Whatever suffering or pain or fear I had was unintentional. But that's just my experience. I don't know what's out there. And like I've said before, I think that there's probably as many life forms out there and around us as there are humans on this planet, as well as look how many agendas there are within humanity. You know what I mean? Every group, every society has its agenda. Every religion has its agenda. You know what I mean? There might be some out there that might not be so nice and might not really particularly care for humans very much. I don't know. From my own, I can only speak from my own experience and my own perspective, in that I'm not afraid. So,
Sorry, I was just trying to write back. There were some statements that were made, but I was just going to write it out if they could ask a question instead. But yeah, anyway, so Debbie, what do you feel like? Would you like to go on some more, or do you think this has been a good time? Because I think it's been great so far, and thank you so much for sharing for everything that you did.
well, I'm good.
Well,
It's up to
yeah,
you.
let's go a little longer, see if any more questions come through, and because I have some some more of my own, and then I
Okay.
figured then we'll end it there then, if
I
that's
told you
okay
I
with you.
love questions because I mean, I may not have the answers to everything. I'll do the best I can, but
Right,
questions for me are like those little bumpers rails that you pop up when you take a kid bowling.
right,
I've got 62 years worth of stuff up here in this little head of mine,
right,
and sometimes I sound like squirrel, 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 because and I get off track. So
right.
questions are great because they keep me focused on one particular thing.
Okay.
And so I like questions.
Well, one particular one was I'm assuming you got to know about Hopkins very well, especially if you have to work that closely with him, and so obviously whatever he wrote about is what's on his mind and what I would assume he was passionate about. But Do you know anything maybe more on insights of about Bud Hopkins? What was his I guess if I can say his dying thoughts regarding the subject? Something that was there anything that he didn't share with the public that he had different thoughts on in private?
Well, you know, I almost looked on him as a father figure. I was young when I met him, like just 23, I think. And he and his wife at the time and his family like really took me in under their wing, and even my whole family loved him, and he was a very compassionate and caring person, and everything that he did to help somebody was, I mean, or try to help somebody, was it came from a place of care and concern and empathy, M I always had to remind myself that, he might have tended to be a little more negative about some things, but this man was working in the emergency room of the entire phenomenon right off in the beginning, and the people that he was meeting and seeing or were coming to him were hot messes like me. I was practically practically couldn't even function in life. So, I mean, I feel like that kind of probably help to mold some of his, you know, at least initial feelings about the whole phenomenon, and have maybe a little bit more of a negative look upon it than I would say now. But overall, I think he was a master at telling a story. He could mesmerize an entire room. He had a million of them because he met so many people in his life. He was a fantastic artist. His art was, I think it was in the Guggenheim Museum. I'm fortunate enough to have a couple of his pieces that I cherish, and I was so grateful when the tornado came. It's like all the stuff that meant something to me I could find in the rubble. Everything else was wrecked, but this good stuff was salvaged. And um, he was very intelligent. He was very well spoken. He reached out to professionals for help. Like he reached out to Dr. Clamar. He got her to help with me and other people. He had other psychologists that he could refer people to. I mean, he's the one that he spent his own money on me for several years, getting me uh, tests. I remember one time going to New York and I had to have it they did an EEG of my brain, electrowave of my brain, and I did a CAT scan with a dye contrast. I had to sign a waiver. All of this was paid for by donations. I don't know who donated the money or the facilities, but to do further research. I had a voice stress test, which is kind of like a lie detector test, and I had psychological and written and verbal psychological testing. At which point, I did tell one of the doctors, "It's okay if I'm crazy. You can tell me that because they make pills for that, and I'm okay with that." Because this stuff was just way too much. At that point, I was still very delicate. I remember the going to New York for the very first time. I had to sell my washer and dryer that I had in storage to get enough money for a bus ticket, and I took a bus to New York, 17 hours. Good God, what a horrible long trip that was. But halfway through the trip to New York, I had this massive panic attack, and I thought, "What the hell is wrong with you? You are a mother, and you are on a bus to New York City, and you're about to meet this man that wrote this book about all this crazy stuff, and he could be an axe murderer. What is wrong with you?" And I wanted to stop the bus and jump off and walk home. But I calmed down. And, Bud was so kind when he picked me up at the bus station, and he could see I was frazzled and very anxious. And he calmed me down, and who was so kind. Then my first subway trip, first ride on a subway, and we're on the subway, and I'm still like one step away from having another panic attack, and all the lights go out. So I freak out again, and he's like, he pats me on the leg and he goes, "It's okay, it's okay. This is normal. This is normal." I'm like, "Oh," but I mean, he was just that's the way he was. He cared about me, and he cared about all the people that he tried to help. And even when I wrote my first book with my sister, and I'm pretty sure there's a few things in there that I shared, that he probably thought was kind of bullshitty, but I mean, he was kind like a father and encouraged me to express myself and do what I needed to do for me. And he was just so, I feel blessed because I was early in his I was one of the first people in his research early in the beginning. As the years passed and he got more famous for what he did and was more well known, he was absolutely swamped, flooded with people coming at him from all directions all the time. And he was just one man. And so I didn't get to see or talk to him as much as I would have liked as the years progressed. When he got cancer of the kidney, he called me. He wanted me to hear it from him before I saw it somewhere else. And he told me about it and how it was going to go. And he did well with it. When he got lymphoma, he called me and he told me he wanted me to hear it from him and not anybody else. And he talked to me about it for a long time because he knew I'd be upset. When he wrote his final book, Art, Aliens, or what, I can't remember what. I feel like an idiot. I can't remember the name of the last book he wrote, but it was about art and aliens. It was like his memoir,
Mhm.
the last thing he did before he passed away. I opened a package up I got in the mail one day, and it was that book. And I'm like, I didn't even realize he was working on this. And I pulled the book out, a beautiful cover. I opened it up, and it was inscribed to me, but there was an envelope inside the book. And inside the book, the envelope was a letter that he had written to me. And it was basically him telling me that he knew he was about to die. And he wanted me, to know how he felt about me and what we went through, the life that we had gone through together, this journey that we'd been on together, what it meant to him, and how, I mean, it was full of some really wonderful things that um, I will cherish for the rest of my life. But
That's
I
a
do
very
know
touching
that
story.
that's the kind of man he was. He was just that way. When I got news, I think Peter Robbins is actually the one who told me that he had passed away, contacted me. I was devastated. I probably cried as much when he died as I did when my parents died. That's how much it hurt.
Mm.
Because that was how much of a part of my life he had become. I had, I actually attributed my life to him in some ways. Ma I definitely wouldn't have had the life I had now. I don't even know if I'd be here now if it weren't for him. But, you know, I can only speak about my experience with him. I
Right.
know he treated me with kid gloves. I mean, he treated me well. He was kind to me. He never put me in jeopardy in any way. And, I was always grateful to him for his help. I know that, I'll tell you this dream. I know he really wasn't, keen on, like, the afterlife much, but, and I would always say, "No, no, I think there's more. I think there's more to it. I think we go on after our bodies die." Not too terribly long ago, as a matter of fact, it was, like, right after I finished this book, I had a dream about him, and it was one of those vivid dreams like I have right before I wake up. And it was short, and we're sitting somewhere at a table, and I sit down, I'm like, "Bud, is that you?" He looked fabulous. He looked young and tan and happy and glowing, and he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, and if you knew Bud, you knew you would never in this life see Bud wearing a Hawaiian shirt, okay? So, I have come to realize that when I do have some dreams like this, some of that stuff is symbolic for other things. So, I'm looking at him and he's smiling and he's shaking his head, but he's not really saying anything, and, I'm like, "I finished this book. Finally did it. I finally did it," and all right at the very end of the dream, he just looked at me and he said, "I'm proud of you, kid." He used to call me kid. He just said, "I'm proud of you, kid." I had said to him, I said, "Is it like I said that it was? What's it like to be dead? Is it like I said?" And he never said yay or nay. He just smiled at me, and his head was bobbing, but he was smiling. And that's later I think that that Hawaiian shirt was symbolic, that he was telling me that he was in paradise.
Mm.
He was in paradise, you know what I mean? But he never answered my questions. He just smiled at me and nodded. But the way he used to do. But yeah, the only thing he said to me was, "I'm proud of you, kid." And then bam, I woke up. But I also woke up feeling like that message was not just meant for me. It was meant for somebody else that he and I both knew. And so I contacted her and I passed that on to her, and she's like, "I have no doubt that that was him." But yeah, so that was really that was a gift to me. That little dream, whatever it was, that little meeting. Um that's the only time in my life I ever dreamed of him. You know,
Right.
I'd haven't
Right.
dreamed
Right.
about Bud Hopkins, and, like, 15 years after he's passed away, and all of a sudden I have a dream and there he is, so it was weird, but yeah, he was, one of a kind. When he passed away, ufology lost a big one, you know?
Right.
So
Well, thank you for sharing that, Debbie. There's several questions now. I hope I can get through some of them, but if we can't, that's all right. One is from
I'm good.
Helio de Sosa Jr. saying, Ms. Cobble, in any of your experiences with Grace, have you seen any kind of weird animal or something like that? Thanks. Maybe he means like some other form of a being other than the Grace.
Right. I'm trying to think. Uh, it's not I don't think so right off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean I won't remember something later. I do know that, one at one point, I was in a place where uh, I thought it was an animal. It was actually, like, on a TV screen, and it was dots and lines, and it was in, like, 3D, and it was moving, and at first I thought it was alive, like an animal, but then I realized it wasn't. So I don't guess that counts. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head right now.
Okay. So the other question is from lost my spot. Ah, there it is. It's from Michael again, asking, did you ever meet or talk to Dr. John Mack during his research?
I met him a couple of times briefly at a conference, and there's a couple pictures of me with him, but I never really got to talk to him at length, and I was so, uh, upset when I found out he died when he got hit by that car over there in London. I was very sad for the world, sad for him, his family, and, sad for myself because I really wanted to talk to him more and get to know more about him. Bud thought highly of him and spoke highly of him, but I just never had the opportunity. You know, I'm in the middle of nowhere out here in the Midwest, and, I've never been out in, there could be years go by when I don't speak about anything like this,
Hmm,
you
okay.
know? I mean, I'm right here in where I live. There isn't anything around me or anybody around me. So yeah, I was really disappointed that I didn't get to meet him, get to know him more at length.
Hmm,
I think he was pretty cool.
okay. The next one is from this one is from Roland. Do you know about Zechariah Stitchin? If so, do you agree with how he explained the origins of humanity's beginning?
Isn't he the
Uh, um,
ancient alien guy? The ancient alien theory?
I think he's the guy that's based on, because he was the one that originally, I believe, was one of the few people that could translate Sumerian tablets. And
Did he write Chariot of the
no,
Gods?
no,
Is that him?
that was
That's Von Daniken.
that was from Daniken.
Okay.
This one is basically wrote. He basically was translating these tablets that claimed that there was a alien race that came here that were using or altering, I believe, altering the existing species genetically with theirs so they can work and mine gold.
I
And
think that, yeah, I think that that's basically, yeah, the whole like they've been here in our past. Yeah, I feel that that's very possible and probable, actually. I mean, yeah, I believe that. I think we've done this a few times. This thing here called, our society. Feel like, I don't think that our history that we have, that we teach our young'uns is really as accurate as we think that it is,
Right. Well,
really.
there is I think there's I forgot his name now. It's a very thick historic book, and it's all the historic anomalies that basically nobody wants to touch or talk about. I forget the forbidden history or something like that. Forbidden archaeology. I don't know what it was called. Um, I shouldn't have even said anything. I wish knew more info so I can actually give something to someone to look up. Maybe if I look it up later, I'll remember.
But,
Um,
yeah, I believe that. I tend to believe that. I mean, it makes sense, really. I mean, think about it.
right. There's Oh yeah, there's one from Fabrizio saying, "Did you ever witness a medical procedure aboard a ship when a Star Child procedure was demonstrated?" Does that make sense?
I had I had a medical I don't know if you call it witnessing. I remember, having a medical procedure done to me, uh, actually twice. Once when, I remember I told you the story about my girlfriend and me and the other girl, and she saw the light at land, and I didn't remember it, and it dragged me out of the car by my
Right.
legs. In that time, um, eventually I started having dreams about, what felt like a medical procedure had to do with my reproductive organs, um, that was actually quite painful. And then,
Do you understand
uh
what? I mean, other than, do you understand why they were doing that? It was just again
no,
for another. Go ahead.
I did not know what was going on. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why it was happening. No, I did not know.
Okay.
And then again, uh another medical procedure of some kind, that was very painful, that also had to do with my reproductive organs in several months down the road. Um, so I don't remember seeing much of it. I mean, I was experiencing it, was having it done to me, but I couldn't see, what was going on. And I've not seen it happen to somebody else. So,
Okay. All right. I guess so. Let's take this as the last question, and this is from Fabrizio again, saying, "Did you go aboard a ship where hybrid and so-called fake pregnancies was explained?" Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know. It's the spelling of it, and Fabrice is actually he's up really late right now because he's in France, you know,
oh,
and
okay.
so forgive the spelling of some of these. Did that make sense,
That's
or do you
okay.
want me to kind of try to figure out what that means?
Well, here's what I think I might understand it. Here's what I can tell him. I remember, um, I do remember some interaction when if you remember the, movie Intruders, at the end, one of they call it the presentation, where I actually see this little girl. They bring this little child, toddler size, in, to see me in this room, and realize, or I feel like that's my kid. And, he there was some attempt at communication between he and and I felt as if he did not understand why I felt upset. And I felt like, I wanted to take her home with me, and he's like trying to explain to me. And I can't tell you, it's not like talking in words. It's like a transference of thought and idea and images and whatnot of me not being able to feed her, keep her alive. So she could not. She had to stay there. But it was a good thing. It was like he was trying to express to me that this was a good thing. Why am I feeling all mad and sad and crazy? This is a good thing. It's like he didn't understand my emotional reaction, and I didn't understand what he it almost felt like he was trying to. feel something that he wasn't accustomed to, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So, it maybe that's what he's referring to in his question. Yes, I do have this memory or these vivid dream of this seeing this child and being told this and not understanding, it. But yeah, I do have that.
Okay. So there was one more that snuck in here, and it's a good question from Roland. I want to ask that, and then I promise this is the last one. It
I'm
says,
good. I'm good.
do you think the extraterrestrials are working with the governments of the world?
Um, a lot of people say that. Honestly, I don't know. I tend, I know that governments do what governments want to do, and it doesn't really matter what people think. And I don't think they really, I don't think we really know all the stuff that our government or any other government on the planet does. So, I mean, I guess it's possible. Um, I imagine, why, hell, I'm sure it's possible, but I don't know for sure. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe we'll find out one day soon. I hear the scuttle of the disclosure and whatnot. Frankly, I think we've been disclosing for a while now.
Right. Yeah. No.
This, but
It's
yeah,
like bit by bit, and
yeah.
I know. Let me see here. There was just something. I think her name is Renee, and she always posts a. I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling up this long chat. I don't know if it's gone by now, but she always has that countdown, and that's kind of informative. I appreciate her doing that. Ah, here we go. 55 days, 6 hours, 19 minutes, and 47 seconds till the 100 days of disclosure. Because I don't know if you heard there was I don't know which stimulus package, but there was some kind of a thing tagged on at the end to disclose about what the government knows about UFOs.
I did not know that.
Right.
I'm
But
not
I
not very well
but a
informed.
lot of
I
that,
mean,
yeah. I just hope, I mean, it's really turns out to be something greater than what we all expect. But it's supposed to be they can only really discuss things that were already declassified. So I don't know how much more exciting it would be once the countdown ends.
yeah, I don't know how much the government knows. I'm pretty sure they know a lot more than they're letting on. And um, I mean, it will be some vindication for people like me, that put up with being dragged for years about our experiences when they finally say, hey, then that stuff is right. That stuff is real. So
Right, right. Well, we'll see. So
we'll see.
Debbie, thank you. Thank you very much. Please, if you could send me the link once it goes live on May 30th, I'll post it under this, in the description under this video so that they can directly access the book
Okay.
that way. Or will
Yeah.
the information about the book that's on the publisher site right now, will that have a link to Amazon?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He'll have links up for all that on the publisher site. I'll also have it on my website,
Right.
links
There's a
for
link
it.
of your website also in the
Yeah.
description.
And,
So
and I'll have also, there are links to get to Bud's two books that are just out now, too, also.
perfect. Good.
Um,
Thank you for that.
And I'll send those to you too.
Yeah.
I'll message those to you right after we get done here so you can do whatever you want with them too. That's awesome. I just think it's great that Bud's work is going to be seen again by so many new young people in this field, and I think it's real important, and I think it's the perfect time for it now, and I was really happy when I found out about that.
Right. Well, that's cool. So,
Mhm.
well, Debbie, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
Everyone
thank you
else,
for thinking of me.
oh,
Thank you
of
so
course,
much.
anytime. I apologize it's been this long. But yeah, everyone that's still watching and didn't get to ask a question, Debbie said that on her website that's in the description below, you should be able to contact her that way and, shoot her
Yep.
over an email. So use that opportunity. But thank you all again very much for watching. Debbie, thanks again. And yeah, let's do this again soon.
Oh yes, let's do it. It was really nice talking to you. Thank you again.
All right. Take care, everyone.